Greetings everyone, welcome back to Blade Bias. I'm going to take a little bit of a break from talking about the Blade show related stuff, although we do have plenty more to talk about. Because a few weeks ago, actually coincidentally, the day that Blade show started, I released a video called I Ask, You Answer. It was the start of a series that I'm calling Flip the Script, where instead of me asking your guys' opinion on stuff, you guys ask me questions. And it's going to become kind of this series where kind of a Q&A thing that we do semi-regularly. Now, I can't guarantee that, how long this is going to go for or how often it's going to be. It's really going to rely on the frequency of good questions that I actually want to answer, which, quick recap, you have a much higher chance of me picking a question that you ask if it's not just surface level, hey, what's your opinion on this balisong versus this balisong? Or like something that you can just find out. Like I've got some people asking me like, hey, what do you think of the cheese versus the squiddy AL? It's like that, not really what I'm looking to do on this series. And then you've got things like, oh, hey, what camera do you use? Or I guess that's more of a fine. I use a DJI Pocket 2. Or like people who are like, hey, what are your other hobbies? It's like, hey, look around the channel. I have posted plenty about my other hobbies. So, but yeah, the thing I want to know for this video, since this is technically the first video, is do you guys want to see this series be kind of a longer form thing? I've tried recording this video once. It came out to about half an hour. So, like longer than my typical episode, but not a Blade Bias podcast level thing? Or do you guys want it to be the standard Blade Bias length, like 6 to 14 minutes, kind of in that range? Let me know what you think. Leave some more questions similar to the ones we're going to answer down below. And let's get going into our first one. I'm going to try and put a little bit of editing effort into this, I think. Coming from Leo37194. In your opinion, what makes a flipping edit good apart from the tricks themselves? You don't post a lot of clips on Instagram, but when you do you find yourself performing worse while recording? And if yes, how do you deal with that? Great question. There's two things, if you're not aware. There's two kind of camps currently that exist on Instagram in terms of sharing balisong content. You have the flipping clips, which are literally just setting up a camera, pointing it at yourself, and flipping as well as you can for, 30 seconds to a minute, and then putting it to a song you like, and then posting it. And then you have the flipping edits, which are sort of the same thing, but usually have a lot more in the realm of cinematography, editing. Look at two fantastic examples of this are Balisong Nerd on Instagram and Jack Pyro on Instagram. I think you also have people like Yaeli, Yaele, who does some like flipping edit style stuff. Things that go beyond just like the point and shoot clips, And I myself have usually done flipping clips instead of edits. But recently I actually did my first edit. I called it Spark. It was born from the passion that I had built up from Blade Show, and I really enjoyed making it. Please go check it out. I have a link to my Instagram in the description as always. But the thing that matters to me in a flipping edit is not necessarily the flipping itself. A flipping clip is where I go to watch good flipping, or even like Bally Comp or something like that. What is far more interesting to me personally in a flipping edit is how are you packaging the flipping? How's the cinematography? Is there a wider story being told? What's the end goal? Are you syncing stuff to music? Are you doing does it flow really well? Is the editing really good? What's the overall narrative that you're trying to tell? And my edit was a narrative about a character who is struck by inspiration and then struggles to put that inspiration into something that they're happy with, and kind of that journey that happens. And that's what I care about so much more in terms of flipping edits. What is the package that you're putting the flipping in rather than the flipping itself? And to answer your second part of that question, yes, I do. I've talked about it on this channel a lot, where even just Blade Bias, I have to focus on maintaining a coherent sentence that you guys can understand and know what I'm talking about, and also flipping in a way that's, somewhat interesting to fill in the void of looking at my feet just dancing around this whole time, So I find that that creates a split in attention. And that's what happens when you set up your camera, because you're trying to flip, but then you're also thinking, am I in frame? Is this a good shot? Have I moved out of frame? Is this flipping good enough for the people that are going to watch this? How am I going to edit this together? Is the lighting good? Did I remember to hit record on the camera? And that kind of split in the attention takes focus away from your flipping, which can definitely noticeably lower the performance of your flipping. What I found that combats this is I'll do one of two things. I will put the camera in a place where I'm not constantly looking at it and not constantly aware of it. And then I will flip for long enough that I almost forget. So I'll put in, headphones to listen to music, and then I will get into a flipping flow such that I kind of forget that I'm recording in the first place. And that kind of allows that split that kind of reduces that attention split and allows me to put more of my focus into my actual flipping rather than worrying about how the video is going to come out. That's generally how I do it. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't. Thank you, Leo, for your question. Rex has a question. What are factors that a balisong needs to be great, and give me something that can make a balisong bad? This is a pretty simple one for me. Whatever makes a balisong great is its adherence to your personal preference. Something that matches your preference or your intended use case for a balisong. If you're looking for a public beater, your intended use case is something that can hold up to a concrete drop. So anything like a chab, anything titanium, anything channel that can hold up to a concrete drop is going to be great to your use case. So really it's about what you're looking for. Do you want something that flips great? Do you want something that's not threatening as a public flipper? Do you want something that's durable? Do you want all three? Do you want none of them? I don't know. What makes a balisong bad, in my opinion, is its inability to do a fundamental catalog of tricks. Balisongs that struggle on chaplains or fans. A great example for me personally is the OG Squiddy. I just can't fan on it, and it makes a lot of my fan-based tricks much more difficult to pull off. And that's something that I think fails as a balisong. If you can't do the tricks that we are making these balisongs for, then you've kind of failed as a balisong. And I think that's really the main thing that makes a balisong bad. And it's also why a lot of reviews of balisongs kind of boil down to, if this is your preferences, you're going to love it. Because we don't get many balisongs nowadays that completely fail to flip or to do specific tricks. So it's just not something that is as common, I guess. But that's what I would say for that one. Dean Flips Balisong says, what are some things other communities have that you wish had a balisong equivalent? There's two main things that I always miss when I come back from other hobbies, whether it's transformers or headphones. And those two things are a thriving secondhand market and a thriving YouTube/content scene. The thing with a YouTube and content scene is it allows you to continue to enjoy a hobby, to continue to immerse yourself in a hobby, learn other people's opinions, learn things from people bringing something up. I could be watching a review of a balisong and someone has some insight that they heard from the manufacturer about that balisong, and then hearing that in that review increases my knowledge base. That was a huge part of getting into balisongs for me, was just consuming all of the content that I could, learning as much as I can. And that's kind of what I do in every hobby that I'm into. And the ability to watch a YouTube video that goes beyond just the simple head mounted stuff, that actually has some rewatchability to it or some entertainment value to it, goes really hand in hand with extending your enjoyment for a hobby. You can watch reviews, like in any other hobby, you can watch reviews, you can watch people doing challenge videos, ranking lists. There's just so much content to consume. In the balisong community, we have head-mounted videos, and that's kind of pretty much where it stands right now. The other thing is, in any other hobby, I can get 9-10 different videos on the same product and get such a wide range of opinions on something that I want to buy. Not necessarily a balisong, but something that I want to buy. And in our community, you'd be lucky to maybe get 3 or 4 proper videos talking about a balisong and getting someone's opinion on it. So I think it'd be really nice to have a wide range of people that you can go to get different perspectives on a specific knife to help you make better purchasing decisions. But it would also be great to have more fun videos that go beyond just reviewing. that allow people to engage with the hobby in a new way or allow people to extend their enjoyment in a new way. The second one is a secondhand market. It's really cool to be in hobbies where I can just go on eBay, look up something that I may want, even if it was released 6 years ago, and 50 different listings pop up, and I can sort through them to figure out who has the best price, who has the best condition of the item, who has the box for it, who has the accessories that I want, who has the whole thing complete for the best price, or whatever the case may be. And in balisongs, you spend a week looking at the balisong market story, and you'd be lucky to find the thing that you're looking for even once. And heaven forbid that person doesn't have a good price or one that you're willing to pay. Good luck. You're just kind of screwed, and you got to wait another 2-3 weeks for someone else to list one. So I think a thriving secondhand market like that would be really, really cool to see in the hobby. But yeah, thank you, Dean, for the question. This one coming in from Squishy, Ohio. Do you think the Chinese balisong companies, not clone companies, but companies like Nibali's or LDY, are overtaking U.S. companies in terms of price, performance, and quality? It seems like with the release of various balisongs, these companies are really starting to step up their game. I think it's undeniable that that is happening to some degree. But I think what's important is to maintain the perspective that these Chinese companies are the exception and not the rule. And this is something that I'm going to make a full video on in the future, that I don't really want to go into huge depth here. But my opinion on the subject basically just comes down to, it's amazing to have these cheaper options, as long as we continue to recognize that China has manufacturing capabilities that we don't here in the States or in Canada or in the EU, which allow them to make things significantly cheaper than any other company. So the problem doesn't necessarily stem from that. It stems from other people holding maybe US-based companies to that same level of quality when it's just physically impossible for that company to maintain that. You can't look at Squid and say, hey, Squid, why are you selling the Squiddy AL for $80 with no bushings when I could buy a cheese for $75 with bushings? There's so much more that goes into that. Squid has, a US-based company. They're paying US wages. They're paying rent in California, for God's sake, which is not cheap. Things that LDY and Nibali's, for all we know, don't really have to deal with because they're dealing with big manufacturing processes that go far beyond, dealing with the same things that you would deal with if you were a US-based maker. And I think it's always important that hobbies have locally supportable brands. Canada has BB Barfly. The EU has, or had, like Chroma, I guess. But just people that kind of live in the country that you live in that you can support. So I think while it is true that the flipping performance of these Chinese-based balisongs have increased, I think the US-based companies and others like Canada, BB Barfly, etc., bring other things to the table that still do allow them to maintain competitive, as long as people don't hold the two companies' feet to the same fire, if that makes any sense. Because we really can't hold them to the same standards because they're dealing with entirely different modes of operation, costs, all of that. But that's something that I'll go into in a future video. Thank you, Squishy, for the question. This one coming in from Ice Noah. Can you put into words how the quality of a knife generally affects the flipping experience? Obviously, a poorly made knife becomes harder to flip, but is there a huge difference between a good and a great balisong when flipping? The way that I've always looked at it, we're going to take two different examples, the Prisma Pro and the Seraph. The Seraph does not flip $500 better than the Prisma Pro. In fact, the Prisma Pro is largely kind of almost there when it comes to comparing it with the Seraph. And this isn't a hard and fast rule. There are some balisongs that people are going to think flip $500 better than another one. It ultimately does come down to preference. But the thing that I find most often you pay for is not flipping experience. The Seraph isn't like a $700 knife flipping experience that you can't experience anywhere else. The experience of the Seraph comes from the fit and finish that MachineWise has to it, the quality, the feel in hand, running your finger down the face, the milling on the faces, and the beautiful blade and all of that. But it doesn't flip $500 better. It has a quality increase that, in my opinion, is $500 better than a Prisma Pro. But I really struggle to point at a specific balisong and say, yes, that balisong is $1,000 because it flips $800 better than this balisong. Because I just don't really think it happens. I think a majority of the increases in like flipping performance kind of stop after a certain price point, maybe in like the $400 range, where once you go above that, you're paying more for machining quality or tolerances or feel in the hand, things like that. And I think the best example I can point you to is the Kraken. The Kraken is one of the most universally beloved balisongs that flippers with $1,000+ collections come back to consistently because they just like it that much. And the Kraken only costs $250. So I definitely don't think that price is specifically I don't think flipping quality is specifically affected by price. In other words, I don't think that an $800 balisong is giving you a flipping experience that you couldn't get in a $300 balisong. But it is giving you a much different experience in other areas, if that makes sense. But thank you for the question, Noah. Coming in from Laserblade, why are bearing balisongs so rare? Bearings are very common and used in folders because it was easier for it to feel smooth. My guess is because flippers won't try it because it's not bushings and calls it there. Similar with washers. Not exactly. I think that's vastly oversimplifying things. In order to understand why there aren't bearing balisongs, you have to understand the difference in how a bearing balisong feels. A washer balisong doesn't feel terribly different in terms of the swing from a bushing balisong. There's difference in tolerances, yes, but if you have a really good washer-tuned balisong, I hesitate to say that someone could pick it up and immediately tell you that it's on washers or bearings just from flipping it. The thing with bearings is that there is a noticeable difference in how the balisong flips because of the way the bearings are. With bushings and washers, there's physical metal against metal contact. There's friction happening. Whereas with bearings, you're getting balls that roll in a circle, and it feels far more frictionless. If you take a bearing balisong and you hold it flat like this, and you push the handle, it will just go, because that's how bearings are. There's very little friction there. Whereas on a bushing balisong, like my squid trainer, you can see that it stops. It stops at certain points because there's friction there that's stopping it. And from what I've heard, talking to many different people at Blade Show or whatever the case may be, people don't like that feeling of frictionlessness. They don't like the feeling of having to overcome that. The balisong wants to swing, and in order to switch directions, you have to overcome that and then, throw it in the opposite direction. So it becomes a little bit more difficult to, switch directions or change the momentum of a balisong because there is so little friction there to help assist you in that process. And I think largely that's why people will stay away from bearings, is because they don't like that feeling. It's especially the reason that many professional flippers that go into like Bally Comp don't like that, because it's just a different flipping profile that isn't very desirable in a lot of cases. So that being said, companies won't put a ton of effort into it because inevitably people will just say, hey, when's the bushing version of this coming out? Look at something like the Talisong Z, originally on bearings, and then they put it on bushings. And a lot of people like the bushing one way better. So it's not necessarily because people aren't willing to try something new. It's because there is a genuine performance difference in that construction mechanism. But thank you, Laser, for the question. Coming in from Stardust, how viable do you think it is for people to make their own balisongs? I found that communities surrounding an item like balisong either gravitate towards making things super easy to customize on their own with a more DIY approach, or offer a ridiculous variety of pre-made, hard to tinker with products. It's kind of a mix of both. You have things like the Replicant, which allow you to do custom things, but the reality is, to create a quality balisong part that's actually going to work, a lot, and I mean a lot of work has to go into that, especially using machines or processes that aren't available to the average person. You know, your average person can't go out and buy a machine capable of cutting G10 or cutting aluminum or machining aluminum into a part for a balisong. So while there are some DIY things, most of them are really just one person doing something for themselves. I mean, a wooden balisong popsicle stick, made of popsicle sticks that people do before they get their first balisong, or a Lego balisong that they get before their first balisong. There's a lot of different things that people will do that's just like a one-off, but if you want something that is going to actually properly work, the amount of work that has to go into that is far higher than I think a lot of casual flippers are willing to put in. So you see a lot more pre-made things existing. It's not impossible. There are people that do it, but it's just, balisongs are already such a difficult thing to produce. There's already not like a ton of profit within them because of how much work has to go into designing, maintaining, continuing to produce them. So it's not really a DIY-able thing. I can't go out to the store, buy some hardwood, and make some scales out of them because they'll shatter, or they'll splinter, or whatever the case may be. So it's not impossible, but it is definitely a little less viable than, action figures where I can just go out and buy paints and then just paint one of my figures for fun, and then that's it. Like, that's pretty accessible. You don't really have anything like that here, besides maybe home anodization. But I think this question, you're more talking about like making parts rather than just customizations like that. Thank you for the question, though. Our second to last question comes from Hoplexers. Is there any kind of overuse injury in regards to balisongs? And if so, how could people avoid that? This is a tough one. I think yes and no. Obviously, anything can be, you can repetitive strain injury anything that you're doing too much. But I don't think we have enough to really say whether that happens or not. And I think a large part of that is because a lot of the balisong community are young kids who aren't really going to suffer from RSIs because they don't flip nearly enough for that actually to come up. RSIs are developed from someone sitting typing at a keyboard for hours and hours and hours a day. And they're getting older, and it's, and I think a lot of kids who are flipping either aren't flipping for hours and hours and hours a day, and if they are, they're young enough that they're not really noticing the effects of that. That's just kind of me wildly taking a swing at that one. It's an interesting question, but one that I really can't answer because there's not a lot of data on it. But I also haven't really heard of any cases of people who do get RSIs. I've maybe heard of a few, but maybe this is something to leave down in the comments. Have you gotten a repetitive strain injury from flipping? And how did that go for you? What did that look like? But Hop, thank you for the question. Final question comes from Bach McGee. Good to see you. Pleasure hanging out with you at Blade Show. One of the topics you mentioned here, I think there should be competitions where trainers are allowed. There are some kids who can't own live blades because of the country they live in or because of their parents, safety, whatever. We are automatically denying these people the ability to do competitions and try them out, which is a very large crowd and a good chunk of the community. What do you think? This is going to be a controversial opinion, or this is going to be a controversial question and answer in general, because I think the balisong community is very full of elitists who want things to stay the way they are and who derive an incredible sense of self-worth based on their ability to endanger themselves by flipping a live blade. And that sounds harsh, but I think it is true, because if you go on the subreddit, it feels like monthly at this point, we get some variation of the post of someone saying, if you flip trainers, you're a wuss, and I'm so much better than you because I flip trainers. And they do get downvoted generally a lot because it's an opinion that I think is starting to kind of go away. But I think the inherent superiority that some people feel towards flipping a live blade is really cringe and something that's going to get in the way of creating a competition like that. That being said, I don't think they're entirely in the wrong there. It is entirely a different thing to get up on stage and flip a trainer versus a live blade. There is a lot more work that needs to go into, perfecting your craft when you're flipping a live blade, because there is an inherent sense of danger. And I think that there is definitely a place for live blade competitions like that, because it it exhibits a level of skill kind of that rises above just flipping, you know? You have to really understand your balisong to be able to pull off some of these tricks that people are doing with the sense of danger, with the possibility of cutting yourself in front of a crowd at the skill level that they do. That being said, if we want the balisong community to grow outside of the US, really grow in markets where knives are looked down upon, it's going to take a long time of destigmatizing trainers to the general public where they understand what they are, they understand that they pose no threat, and it's actually something that people are invested in. No one's looking at a yo-yo and thinking, oh my God, that's a deadly weapon that someone's going to kill me with. It's something that they'll stop and watch on the street if they see a street performer doing that. And if we can ever get balisongs to that point, trainers specifically, I think there's a huge chance that, or there's a huge demand for competition like that in those markets, because they can't flip live blades, but they can definitely flip trainers. So, and I definitely don't think that you're advocating with this question the destruction of any live blade, you know, like we stop doing live blade events. But adding that would be such a tool. I totally agree. It would be such a tool to growing the community outside of just a US-based competition system. That being said, I just don't know if the community is ready to admit that trainers are on the level of live blades, because ultimately it's still a huge skill to be able to flip a trainer well. Even if it's not as difficult as flipping a live blade, it's still something that merits, I think, a competition, like you're saying, in order for people to, you know, show off their skills. And I think it's going to be very difficult to do that when you have people posting on Reddit who genuinely believe that they are more of a person for flipping a live blade, because this is something that's documented. And it is a minority, but it's a very vocal minority that is going to really pipe up once you start talking about creating competitions that allow trainers. So I think it's necessary for the overall growth of the community. And I know there's people that are going to come in and say, well, I don't want the community to grow. It's going to do this, this, and this. Fine. That's up to you, whatever. I'm personally on the side of, if there's more people who are interested in this, then there's more people to buy balisongs from Machine-Wise, Squid Industries, LDY, Nabali's, you know, companies like that. There's also more people to give attention to, give eyes to amazing content creators that we have in our community. Will Hirsch, Balisong Nerd, Jack Pyro, Benjamin Flips, Pez Flips, Buffness, Ghost, like whoever you watch on YouTube, it's more eyes to them. It's more dollars to your favorite balisong company. So I'm personally in the camp of, I love this and I want this to get as big as it can so that we can all succeed and we can all grow the community together, because I think that's really cool. And I think at the heart of that is going to ultimately be a destigmatization of flipping a trainer, especially in a competition setting. Again, that doesn't mean we should abolish the practice of flipping live blades or doing live blade competitions. But I think, especially in those outside markets, it's something that we're going to have to see if we want the hobby to grow like that. Thank you for your question, Bach. Thank you, all of you, for your questions. Even if I didn't pick it, I really appreciate it. Leave some more in the comments. Again, please give me something a little deeper than what's better, this balisong or that balisong. But yeah, let me know if you prefer this longer format or if you want it shorter than this. Give me some more feedback on the series, and I will see you guys in a few weeks for the next episode. Later.